Hello anatomists. We are going to do some drawing notes here, and I really like drawing notes as a strategy for getting a lot of information condensed down onto a single piece of paper, hopefully in a format that's a little bit easier to digest than a textbook. These drawing notes are going to be about the integumentary system, specifically the skin. The integumentary system is all about body coverings, and that is chapter 6 in our textbook. Now, before we get into the integumentary system, I think it's good to lay some fundamental groundwork about tissue types. And tissue types is actually in chapter 5 of our book. So let's get some notes about tissue types up here. And that is chapter 5 in our textbook. And you can use this little mnemonic to help you remember the 4 tissue types. Seamen, like guys on a boat. The C will stand for connective tissue. The M will stand for muscle tissue. E for epithelial. And N for nervous tissue. So those are the 4 big tissue types. We're going to have a whole unit on muscle system and nervous system, so we'll save the specifics about those for those units. But connective tissue and epithelial tissue, we're going to spend a lot of time right here. So connective tissue has a lot of blood vessels, so we would say that tissue is vascular, whereas epithelial tissue is avascular, meaning it doesn't have any blood vessels or very few blood vessels. Connective tissue has its cells spread out. And the reason that the cells are spread out is because there's extensive extracellular matrix. So like fibers that are outside of the cell that kind of form a framework for those connective tissue cells. In contrast, epithelial cells has cells that are tightly packed. So tightly packed cells. And what we're going to do is we're going to see that all of these tissue types, connective, muscle, epithelial, and nervous, are present in the skin. Before we dig a little deeper, I think it's worth doing a little, since we're here, let's do a little dive on epithelial tissues and put a note in the margin. So epithelial tissues, there are different types, and they're mostly based on how many layers they have and what is the shape of the cells. So if epithelial tissue has 1 layer or 2 or more layers, there's a different name. For 1 layer, it's called a simple epithelial tissue, and for 2 or more layers, it's called a stratified epithelial tissue. And stratified literally just means like layers, so strata are layers. Now the shapes, epithelial tissues come in 3 basic shapes. One shape is really flat cells. Really flat epithelial cells are called squamous. And then we've got cells that are cube shaped, so those would be cuboidal epithelium. And then we have cells that are tall, like columns, and those are called columnar epithelial tissue. So depending on the layers and the shape, like you could have simple squamous epithelium, stratified squamous epithelium, simple columnar epithelium, and so on. All right, so that's some good chapter 5 stuff all in one place. And now let's dig into the skin. The integumentary system also includes like your hair and nails and stuff like that, but we're mostly gonna go for just some skin here. Now, I added some sketches here that are gonna help you out and stay organized with my drawing. And I wanna start with this basic slab right here. So we're gonna divide this up into 3 layers. So I'm gonna draw a layer like this, and then I'm gonna draw a wavy layer like this. Now, this is gonna be the superficial or super surface part of the skin, and then we'll be deeper down here. And here are our three layers of the skin. The most superficial layer is called the epidermis. Then underneath the epidermis is the dermis. So this layer is called the dermis. And I'm talking about like this layer in here is the dermis, not just like that top interface. And then down at the bottom is the hypodermis. And another term for the hypodermis is the subcutaneous layer. Man, this video looks pretty spooky because of how the lighting is in it, but we're just gonna go with it. All right, so those are the layers of the skin from superficial to deep: epidermis, then dermis, then hypodermis. And we're gonna add some structures to this. And let's go ahead and start with the hypodermis or subcutaneous layer. I'm gonna use yellow to just draw a bunch of circles in here, and this is going to be the subcutaneous fat. Oh, I should have pre-drawn this. I'll make these circles a little bit bigger. And I've completely abandoned my circles. Now I'm going back. All right, here we go. So this is going to be our subcutaneous fat. I'm going to try to use black for all of these labels. All right, so the pro term for fat is that it's adipose tissue, but I'm going to write adipose and then fat. Another thing that I want to do is for all of these tissue types, I'm going to write what tissue type this is. So fat is a connective tissue, so I'll put a C for connective. And the job of subcutaneous fat is that it's an insulator. So it just keeps heat trapped, heat that's made in your body, like trapped in your body to conserve body heat. Now, the next thing that we're gonna add here is we're gonna add some blood vessels. And we've heard about these blood vessels before. So I'm gonna add red for some arteries, some oxygen-rich blood. I'm gonna add blue for some veins that go right next to those arteries. And I'm gonna label these. So both of those together are dermal, so skin, blood, skin, blood vessels. All right, and those are mostly gonna be made up of epithelial tissue, is the blood vessel tissue, and then the blood inside is actually considered connective tissue. All right, so what do dermal blood vessels do? They, just like any blood vessels, they're gonna provide nutrients and oxygen to tissues. But we've heard about dermal blood vessels before in body temperature homeostasis. They will dilate when the body is too hot, and they will vasoconstrict when the body is too cold. So dilation will get that hot blood to the surface so that your body can radiate heat more efficiently. Constriction will keep the blood more towards the core, so you're losing less heat. That's all I want. That's all the structures we have to really keep track of in the subcutaneous layer. Let's move up to the dermis. All right, first I'm gonna put some glands in. And one gland that we have to keep track of, I am no artist, folks. So we're gonna draw a duct here. I'm gonna leave a little gap. And that's gonna go all the way through the epidermis. And then when we get down to the dermis, we're gonna put something that looks like some little toes or something in there on both sides. And then let's make a little bulb like that. And then the reason I left this gap is because we're gonna have another duct coming off here. And we're gonna go extend down into the dermis. And then this duct just kind of like curls back on itself and makes like a it makes like a coil. It makes almost like a ball of duct down there. And let's draw another duct over here. And that goes all the way up to the skin surface, through the epidermis, down into the dermis, and then kind of like that same thing. So it will fold back on itself and make a little tangle, like a kind of like a ball of yarn. So all of these structures are ducts, and ducts are common, just like tubes that fluids can move in between. And let's talk about these different glands that we drew. Actually, first, let's put a hair in here. So this is meant to be a hair. Our person is going to have brown hair. So the hair goes all the way down to the bottom, and then there's kind of like a thick point down there, and then the hair sticks out. So this would be like the hair shaft. Let's label it so we know what it is when we are using this as a study tool. Hair shaft is right here. Hair is actually an epithelial tissue, and that epithelial tissue is born way, way, way down here at the base of this hair structure. And in order for hair to be like born down here and for those cells to divide, those cells need some nutrients. And so what we're going to do is we're going to branch up our dermal blood vessel to send some nutrients up to the base of that hair, so that the hair cells can receive nutrients to divide and grow. And then that actually like pushes the hair shaft up and out. And so the cells that are at the tip of your hairs are the oldest cells, and then these are the youngest cells of the bunch. All right, this structure that I drew that kind of looks like little toes there, that's called a sebaceous gland. So I'm gonna start writing up here and then connect it. Sebaceous gland, and that is this structure down here. Sebaceous glands, and all glands are epithelial tissue. So let me just write the name of all of these glands. So this next type of gland is called an apocrine or apocrine sweat gland. And that's this guy over here. And then this one over here is called a merocrine sweat gland. All right, let's label that guy. All right, so all glands are going to be made of epithelial tissue. Let me put my E there for epithelial tissue. And now you can see we've got connective tissues and epithelial tissues. Let's talk about the jobs of those glands. I want a green pen. Let me go get one. All right, so first, sebaceous glands, so all glands make a substance. The substance made by sebaceous gland is called sebum. Sebum is a substance that has some fats in it and some proteins, and basically it makes your skin soft. So your skin doesn't crack. It keeps the integrity of your skin as a barrier in place. Sebum keeps your skin a little bit more waterproof, so water doesn't come in or go out as easily if it's not supposed to. And sebum has antifungal properties, so you don't have mushrooms growing on your body. It just keeps some fungi at bay. Next is apocrine sweat glands. Obviously, they make sweat, like their name says, but this sweat is like stress sweat. And so when you're stressed out, you start to sweat like in your armpits. So these are high in the axillary region and also in the groin region. And this sweat also contains proteins and lipids. And then when bacteria on your skin eat those proteins and lipids, like that's why you can get stinky armpit sweat. All right, and then our last gland type here is our merocrine sweat gland. They make sweat also, but this is mostly that sweat that you get from heat or activity. So if you're working out or playing some basketball or something, you're going to start sweating, and different people tend to sweat in different places more profusely than others. But like on your forehead, you're going to have a lot of miracrine sweat glands, and like on your back and on your feet and on your hands, like places like that, where you sweat when you get more hot. That's where you're going to have more concentration of miracrine sweat glands in that skin. All right, let's see. I want to move on to some nervous system tissues. I'm going to draw the nervous system tissues in orange. So these are really cool looking guys. And we're going to start one down here. And then it's just going to kind of like do one of these spiral pinwheels out. And then we're going to branch it off to the other side. And that's super fun to do. So let's do another one. And another one here. Before I move on to that, I just want to say that these glands, so the product sweat is going to be made down here, and then that sweat makes its way to the surface of the skin through the duct, and there's a pore on top of the skin where the sweat comes out on top of the skin. The same for both of these, and then sebum as well. All right, so these are some nervous system structures, and I'm going to draw another one. So we're going to still have it come out from underneath the hypodermis, actually. And this one's going to send projections all the way up to the most superficial part of the dermis. And we're going to put these little like bulbs on there. So let's send a couple of those bulbs out this way, and a couple of those bulbs out this way. And let's send one more out there for good luck. So these are two different structures. And you can tell that they have different forms, and those forms are related to their function. So let's label this one. So this guy right here is called a lamellated corpuscle. And this guy right here, let's take this note all the way up here. This one is called a tactile corpuscle. And you might know tactile as meaning like touching. So this one has to do with some touching. Those are both nervous system tissues, and they're specialized sensory neurons that detect different things. So your tactile corpuscles, consider those light touch receptors. So if something like brushes against your skin, then your tactile corpuscles are going to feel that because they're more closely to the surface. And your lamellated corpuscles, they'll feel like pressure. So let's call those the pressure sensors. And I think the fact that these guys are deep and these guys are more superficial says a lot about the relationship of structure and function. So if something just brushes against your skin, you want the receptors for that to be more close to the skin. But if something is meant to feel pressure, if that was at the surface of the skin, it would react to gentle touch. In order for these to get kind of like deformed and stimulated, you really got to push down on that skin to stimulate these guys down here. So that's a good form follows function. All right, let's see. What am I missing? Oh, I am missing a muscle tissue. So let's go ahead and draw that in. So there are these cute little muscles that are actually attached to the base of your hair follicles. And I'm going to put that guy in here as just like this purple band here. So it just attaches to that hair follicle. I'm going to modify my apocrine sweat gland label to go all the way to this guy. And now this muscle tissue right here, I'm going to write about it down in this space. So let me put a label here. We're going to go all the way down here. And this is called an erector pili muscle. And obviously that's a muscle tissue. So now we've got all of the semen. We've got connective tissue, muscle tissue, epithelial tissue, and nervous tissue, and a couple of examples of some of them. All right, erector pili muscle. What these do is when they contract to make your hair stand up. You get like goosebumps from that. And the goal of having your hair stand up is it's supposed to like trap heat against your skin a little bit better. And then also it makes you kind of like look bigger from an animal standpoint of all of your hair standing on end. And that's why you get those goosebumps when you're stressed. All right, this is looking pretty good. But we haven't talked about the epidermis yet. And to talk about the epidermis, we're gonna do like an exploded view here. So what this is this is just like a continuation here. So it's just like an exploded view. So we can see what's going on in the epidermis. The epidermis has several layers to it, and there are 5 layers to it. And I want to talk about those 5 layers, and I'm going to give you, in class, I'll give you a little mnemonic and tell you a story. Just remember to ask me. So here, the layers, their names start with C, L, G, S, B. And so my challenge to you would be to think of like a mnemonic that uses those letters like in a sentence or something, and I will tell you mine in class. Just remind me to do it. All right, now these layers have different names, and I want to write the names, and then I want to talk about 2 of them in particular. So this top one is called stratum. Let me move this paper down. This top one is called stratum corneum. So that's the C. And then the next one that's right here is called the stratum. So they all start with stratum. Lucidum, that's the L. Underneath that, stratum. Granulosum. Underneath that, stratum spinosum. And then our bottom one at the base is called the stratum basale. All right, and I bunched these together because we're not going to learn too much about these layers. This corneum and basale are the most interesting to us. Now, all of these epidermis layers are epithelial layers. So I'm going to put E next to these just because they're all good examples of epithelial tissue. They're like sheets of cells that are tightly packed together. And I'm going to start this story with the stratum basale layer. So that one's at the base. And these cells are the ones that divide to make new epidermis. And these stratum basale cells, I'm going to box them up in here. Just draw like, so there's like a layer of them. And I'm going to draw nuclei in these layers. So these divide. And as they divide, they push these cells up, and there's a transformation that happens. And what happens is like all of these cells in the stratum spinosum, and the stratum spinosum gets its name because under a microscope, like stained a certain way, these cells look like they have like spines in them. The stratum granulosum cells, now they start to like lose their nuclei. So I'm drawing less nuclei in there. And then by the time you get to the stratum lucidum and stratum corneum, there's no nuclei left. All right, so the stratum granulosum, they got their name because under the microscope, stained a certain way, these cells looked really grainy, whereas the stratum lucidum cells, like luz, that's the same for like light in Spanish. So these cells looked really clear and really bright under the microscope. And then the stratum corneum, that means like horn. So this stratum corneum layer is pretty cool. So it's a really thick layer. So this has like 25 to 30 cell layers. And it takes about a month for cells to get up from the stratum basale to the stratum corneum, and then the cells will just kind of like fall off. So your skin at the surface is only about a month old. So these cells are constantly shed. So if you just scratched your arm, like skin cells would fall off, and those would be stratum corneum cells. Another name for these cells is called keratinocytes. Keratin, like the protein keratin, oocytes, and that means like cells with a bunch of keratin, and they're characterized by being tough and waterproof. All right, so those are the notes that we want to write there. Now, the process that happens as these stratum basale cells divide and move upward, we already talked about how they lose their nucleus, and what happens is these cells undergo a transformation to become keratinocytes, and that process is called keratinization. And what happens in keratinization, that's like about a 30-day process of that transformation, and the cell contents, like the nucleus and the mitochondria and all of those organelles, those cell contents get replaced by keratin, by that protein keratin, because keratin is tough and waterproof and gives your skin that property, along with the sebum making your skin waterproof as well. So that's like a pretty cool process that happens there. And in order for these cells to be born down here, you need a lot of nutrients. And so what happens to these dermal blood vessels is that they will send branches up to right underneath the epidermis, and then the blood vessels will hang out right under the stratum basale layer. But the blood vessels don't extend into your epidermis. That's how you can get like a minor paper cut or something, and sometimes it doesn't bleed. That just means that the cut didn't extend into the dermis. It just stayed in these layers. So on your epidermis, there are 25 to 30 layers of stratum corneum, making sure to keep that barrier in place. Stratum lucidum, I don't know, maybe just like 1 to 3 layers. Granulosum and spinosum, those have more layers in them, maybe let's call it like 8 to 12 layers. And then stratum basale is a single layer. Another cool thing that happens in the epidermis is that there are cells kind of like embedded in the stratum basale layer. So I'm just going to color in like these 2 stratum basale cells. And these cells are called melanocytes. So let's, we're going to draw some stuff down here. So for our melanocytes layer, let's kind of just branch out our label. Melanocytes. That's this type of cell. And what melanocytes do is they make a protein called melanin. And what melanin does is, well, let's call it melanin pigment, because that's what it is. It's the skin pigment protein. So that's your skin and hair color, brought to you by melanocytes. And that also gives you UV protection. So different people can have different amounts of melanin and then different types of melanin. I know that there's at least like 3 different types of melanin. And then people that have darker skin are going to have more melanin. And then, of course, if you're like out in the sun, then what can happen is your body can increase its melanin production. Now, melanocytes are pretty cool, and on some diagrams they kind of look like an octopus. So they send these tentacle-like things in between the more superficial layers of the epidermis, and then they make melanin in this main cell body part, send that melanin throughout these projections, and then drop those melanin kind of granules, I guess, into skin cells that they're around. So I'm putting some melanin in there and making some dark spots right there in this layer of epidermis. So that's pretty cool. I think we're good on epidermis, but I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about the dermis, and this is kind of crowded, so let's use some of this space over here. Now, your dermis has a lot of connective tissue in it, and the main cell type, or a main cell type in your dermis, is called fibroblasts. So I'm going to draw fibroblasts as like these little guys that kind of look like little fried eggs or something like that. All right, so let's see. Let's make like 6 fibroblasts. 5. Let's put one over here. We don't want that area to feel left out. And I'm going to label one of these. So these are fibroblast cells. And what fibroblast cells do is they make connective tissue fibers. And so that makes fibroblast cells. I want you to associate those with connective tissue. And these connective tissue fibers are also called extracellular matrix. And so remember, way up there, we talked about how connective tissue has a lot of extracellular matrix. Well, fibroblast cells are going to be some cells that are in charge of making that. Now, the cool thing about extracellular matrix fibers is that there's some different flavors. And so I'm going to draw some like pretty thick versions of extracellular matrix fibers. Let's connect up here to the epidermis, and we'll connect these fibroblasts to each other so that we're kind of making this like connected network of fibers. All right, let's connect one more up here. Now these fibers that are really thick fibers, let's do another one down here just to make it easier to label. All right, we're gonna label this one. These are collagen fibers, and if you know about skin products, you've probably heard of collagen being like an ingredient in some like lotions and skincare products. These are known for being very thick and tough. And so you can pull on your skin and your skin isn't going to like rip easily because of those collagen fibers are there. But you want your skin to be stretchy too. And so we're gonna put in some other fibers that are gonna let our skin still be tough, but also stretchy as well. And we'll put one of those thinner fibers down here so that we can label that fiber type. And those are going to be called elastic fibers. And I bet you can guess what elastic fibers do. They give our skin elasticity, which just means that it helps our skin be like stretchy. So you can pull on your skin and it's not going to tear because you've got those collagen fibers, and it's going to be elastic and snap back into place because you have those elastic fibers. So good form follows function connections there. And this is like a lot of the stuff. This is like a lot of the structures that are in your skin. Now, you probably noticed that I have some boxes down here. And in these boxes, I want to talk a little bit of physiology. So we did a lot of anatomy up here and some like minor function stuff, but I want to talk about the integumentary system as a whole down here. So grab your favorite color. I'm going to use like this magenta color, and we're just going to do all one color in the bottom, unless you want to do like different colors. And I want to talk about 4 different topics. So this will all be like our physiology down here. The first thing that I want to put in this box is I want to talk about how your skin has a function as a barrier for your body. Next, I want to talk about how your skin is important for sensation. Third, I want to talk about how your skin is important for temperature homeostasis. That's a long one. And last, I want to talk about vitamin D synthesis. Oh, I'm going to go off the edge. That's okay. All right, so let's just kind of like march through these a little bit. I'm going to move up just to make this easier to see in the center. So what does your skin have that makes it a good barrier? Your skin has keratin protein in those keratinized cells. So sometimes those cells are called keratinocytes, right? Because they have keratin in them. So keratin protein in your epidermis. And what that does is that seals water in your body. So it keeps water from just evaporating. But also it seals water out. So like if it rains, your body isn't just going to get, all wet from water just being able to come in. Barrier is also a good, skin is also a good barrier because there's sebum. And it's important that sebum has oils in it. So those oils help keep skin from cracking, because then the barrier would be compromised and like bacteria could get in through skin cracks. And remember, it's antimicrobial, antifungal to keep microbes from growing and making a home on your skin. All right, your skin is a barrier for UV, a UV barrier, thanks to those melanocytes making melanin. And then last, your skin is really good at wound healing. And the reason why is because that stratum basale, your stratum basale, whenever there's like a break in cells that's from a cut, your stratum basale kind of activates and divides quickly. Like think about that. When you get like a paper cut, just within a couple of days, it's pretty much healed already, thanks to those stratum basale cells down here. All right, so that's how your skin can act as a good barrier. Let's talk about sensation. Remember, we talked about light touch, and your skin can feel something brush against it or a ghost or something coming past you because you have your tactile corpuscles. And those tactile corpuscles are near the surface. They're superficial. And that way, even the lightest of touches can stimulate those tactile corpuscles. We talked about how your skin can sense pressure. And it can sense pressure. Your skin can sense pressure efficiently because it has those lamellated, like lamella are just those rings. We saw that in the skeletal system before too. Lamellated corpuscles. And those are deeper so that they're not stimulated by light touch. Instead, something needs to deform the skin all the way down to that layer in order for the lamellated corpuscles to be stimulated. And then finally, your skin can feel temperature. And that's because those thermoreceptors that we talked about in body temperature homeostasis are located in the skin. So let's just continue right over to there. We've got thermoreceptors in the skin. Also in the skin related to temperature homeostasis, we've got those dermal blood vessels. And the dermal blood vessels are like little tiny body temperature homeostasis magicians because they can do vasodilation so that your body releases heat more efficiently. But They can also do vasoconstriction. They're like little transformers. And vasoconstriction conserves heat. Your body's making heat all the time. That's pretty crazy. All right, and then also, don't forget this. We've got our merocrine sweat glands. And those are the sweat glands that make sweat when you're hot. And then what happens is when the sweat evaporates, that evaporation pulls heat out of your body as well. So that's called evaporative heat loss or evaporative cooling. All right, so that's how our skin is involved in the physiology of temperature homeostasis. And last, let's talk about vitamin D synthesis. So you might have heard that you need to go out into the sun or get some exposure to UV rays in order to make vitamin D, and that's absolutely true. And what happens is there's like three chemicals involved in like two chemical transformations. And I don't want you to like have to know the names of the chemicals, but know that vitamin D is what happens at the end. And then we're gonna call the chemical before, we're just gonna call it pre-vitamin D. And then the one before that, we're gonna call it pre-vitamin D. And sometime in like your studies, you'll know the names of these, but it's not important now. So this chemical transformation happens at your skin, and this chemical transformation this is where you need the sun. So that's where you need those UV rays to help this chemical transformation. And then this is happening in your skin, and then that pre-vitamin D gets taken into your blood vessels to your liver and kidneys. Where the second chemical transformation happens there to make vitamin D. And vitamin D, we'll learn about later on, is really critical for calcium absorption in your digestive system. All right, that's it. I know this video was kind of long, but we got a lot done. Zoom out. Remember that we started with pretty much a blank sheet of paper, and now we've got this cool, helpful study tool. So save this, use this to study, and add to it with Post-it notes or in any small amount of white space, anything else that you think is useful about the skin.